All right, welcome to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead, pour white lightning straight onto your brain. Today is a bit of political potpourri and then a little bit of Wheel of Time, and we'll see how quickly we get banned.
I don't think we'll get banned because one of the things you wanted to talk
Yeah,
about, the person in question made a YouTube video about his banning
yeah,
on
yeah.
Twitter. And now he did very sarcastically, satirically overdo some of the other things. And I thought it was well done. You would even think he probably practiced this many times
Mhm.
before he posted it. But did you want to do that first and get it out of the way, or
Yeah, let's get this out of the way because I was already, well, I didn't get to it last time when I was old man rants at clouds, but I was already really annoyed because uh, we were traveling. And so I was at a hotel, which meant I was watching TV, which meant I had to get subjected to commercials about Pride Month. All right. This is what's wrong with you kids these days. Pride. Samuel, what is pride?
uh, it's a it's confidence taken to arrogance, if I had to define it in a few words.
And that
It,
is
it's
where it is a
yeah,
sin, is when you go overboard, when you go from being proud of something to being prideful.
yeah. That's a good kind of parsing out of the difference, because we there is a benefit to having pride in things, in pride in your accomplishments, pride in what you've done, and this is the problem with these things for me, because everybody keeps trying to make it a black and white word or a black and white situation. And all human emotion, from my perspective, for those that have been following us for a while, are all on a spectrum, and they all have benefits and negative aspects to them. So being proud of, say, your invention is adaptive, because now you have that desire to put that out in front of your community for the benefit of your community, or even your own monetary gain and your own survival. And that's a good thing about pride. But where it becomes negative is when it becomes the thing.
That is a really good example. Just made me think of something that I think will illustrate what I'm talking about here. Is Steve Jobs is a good example of this. If you look at his biography, and he was very proud of something very innovative that he had created, he became very prideful and ran himself out of his own company and nearly ran that company into the ground.
Mm-hmm.
He came back still focused, still kind of an arrogant dick, but less prideful, humbled by his experience. And then look what he was able to do with Apple.
Well, see, and so we are attaching something to it. And in my example, it was the invention. So I'm going to stick
Mm-hmm.
with my analogy. It becomes pride instead of being proud when it detaches from the invention. So now it becomes about me versus what I did or what I
Right.
accomplished.
And now think of what that is when there was never a thing to begin with. Okay, the pride was always self-centered. And that's what this Pride Month, this Rainbow Mafia stuff is all about. It's all about you. There was never a thing, there was never an accomplishment. It's just
There
you are
was,
you, and that's great.
there was. It just doesn't exist anymore. In fact, it's the inverse. There was, because at a certain point in time, it actually did take bravery to come out. And pride started celebrating the people who were brave enough to take the risk of coming out. Now it's the inverse, because now it's cool to come out. Now you're actually not special unless you come out. So at one point in time, you risked your life to come out, and that's something to celebrate to some degree. But we're past that.
And to my mind, I can see how easy it became what it is, because yes, the act of coming out was brave, but the thing itself wasn't. It was just how you like to get your friction. Who the hell
Mhm.
cares? That's not that special.
Well, it's just so many parts to certain things, and I think it is beneficial to be proud of those that took those first steps in anything, any situation, not just this one.
And that was the other point I wanted to make, and why Pride Month annoys the crap out of me so much, is because compare and contrast with uh with Black History Month, we have history. Now, there are certainly plenty of groups and people out there who have and have been doing, Black Pride, Brown Pride, all this crap has been around for a while, but at least in the mainstream, we're celebrating something and commemorating something, a thing. We're commemorating historical achievements, things that were done, difficult things that were done to the people literally lost their lives. Uh, Martin Luther King, Medgar Evers, a number of people lost their lives in the civil rights movement, and then hundreds of thousands of people lost their lives in the abolition movement, if you go back to the Civil War. So I've mentioned this before. I get annoyed when I see this meme about, the things that Irish immigrants had to overcome, and the punchline is something to the effect of it, but they're not asking for reparations because they're not pussies. Okay, har har, funny, but there's a big damn difference between uh discrimination and having a rough time as immigrants, which is a good point, because like the Italians had the same thing, because a lot of people don't realize this. The Italians weren't considered white. South and East Europeans weren't white. White people were Western Europeans, the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. Uh, but there's a big damn difference between that and being someone's property. And then even when you're done being someone's property, you have it's no longer cultural discrimination, it's on the books legal discrimination. It's a big difference, and we should recognize that. And that's something we do commemorate and celebrate, are those achievements. And now we come to Pride Month, and I feel I need to come out and let everyone know that I get real horny about redheads with big tits. I'm so brave.
So
Who
what you're saying
cares?
is, if we made it about celebrating the original gay rights activists that fought for equality, it would be cool. It would be cool. But because it's about celebrating me,
Mm-hmm.
it has taken that turn. That's where it becomes uncool. And I'm with you on that. And I do agree they could have chosen a better name. But yeah, it's all about what you're celebrating. Are you celebrating me because I'm this thing, or are you celebrating the accomplishments of those that were kind of like me before me when things were different? And I think that's where the separation comes.
And we've talked about this. I've ranted before when I ranted about the
Let me add
nonsense.
one thing to
Okay.
it before, so because this might add to your rant. It's also the pushing of agenda based on the movement.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That is because I'm sure that was part of those commercials.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So that's the dirty side. It's, again, it's not, these are the accomplishments of the people that pushed for equality in the past. Celebrate me now, accept me now,
Mm-hmm.
and also do these other things in the name of. And that's where we are now. That's why it's different.
Well, and the absurd double think of, here's a commercial with I don't know if it was trans or drag. What the hell's the difference anymore? Of look at me, I'm so proud, I'm so brave. And then a couple commercials later, it's CBS Sports celebrates Title IX. You don't even know what a woman is. How can you celebrate Title IX when you're celebrating a woman with a boner who was the 400 and something ranked man, now beating girls by multiple body links in the pool.
Well, and this is the disconnect with that community is the refusal to accept incremental change, and then that propensity tends to lead to an overaction that shoots you in the foot for your cause. So if there is anything we still need to do for these communities or acknowledge with these communities, they just blew it up by saying this guy that still dates women, he's a trans lesbian.
Mm-hmm.
You know, all the other examples, this is just the most famous example. They shot the whole movement in the foot with these actions. And then the drag parties for the kids, they're shooting the whole movement in the foot. Now, some of it's purposeful to try to get a reaction out of the right so they can say they're violent white supremacists, but it's the thing that's holding back true dialogue on anything.
I finally got around to watching Clifton Duncan's podcast with the Critical Drinker, and he made this point multiple times that others have made too. And you know, you can see it anecdotally coming true that he's afraid. For anyone who doesn't know, he is a black man who has, you know, formal education and training in the arts, in acting. He is a working actor, but he also does this podcast talking about these woke issues, and he is very concerned that people like him, people who look like him, are going to have their work not appreciated as much at best, or at worst denigrated by people who are just going to look at him in a role and immediately think, well, he got that role because of how he looks.
Well, look at what we got with this whole new Lord of the Ring series. How many people are not going to watch just because of what they've done that we know of without ever seeing a minute of footage? I know we're not going to watch. It's how many good actors and actresses of all makeups, people of color, which I still hate that term, homosexual, heterosexual, pick your poison. How many of those that are actually good are going to not be exposed to a lot of new fans because it was forced in a way that was completely obvious?
And when I was watching that discussion, I wanted to jump in and shout a specific example that I think is a good illustration of this. I love Denzel Washington. I love him as a person, and I love his work. And he's a great example of this, because he brought up people of that era of, you know, these guys are lucky because they were able to establish themselves in their craft as artists before the woke nonsense. So people understand that these people actually work to get where they are. And Denzel Washington specifically, Kenneth Branagh did a film version of Much Ado About Nothing, Shakespearean comedy, and cast Denzel Washington as the prince. And to me, that's a stark contrast with the push to, you know, have a female and or black James Bond or any of those kinds of things, because over here on this side, the woke side, it's being done purposely to push a message and to turn what should be entertainment into a platform. When you cast a black man in this Shakespearean play that's a farcical comedy, it doesn't matter. In fact, it adds to the silliness that Denzel Washington is the prince and Keanu Reeves is his bastard half brother. It adds to the silliness, and it doesn't really matter who's in that role. On the other hand, if you cast me as the title role in Othello, that would be stupid, because that does matter, because then you would be trying to make a point. Like if I did that, trying to make the point of this race swapping is nonsense, then it wouldn't be art anymore. It would be a platform, and I wouldn't even watch that.
This is where movements sacrifice the goal, because it becomes so obvious it's about the movement and not about the people that would benefit from it.
Speaking of sacrifice, let's get into why it took us a while to actually start recording, because trying to find these statistics was really annoying. But I think sacrifice is a good word, because there are actual human beings, human lives being sacrificed for the greater good for this movement. I thought of when we brought up what's his bucket, the swimmer, and I was thinking this isn't that new. It's just getting headlines now. Because what was it? Was it Fallon Fox? Was that the guy who liked to break women's faces, literally?
Yeah, mixed martial artist. Thai
But
boxing and mixed martial arts. Yeah.
but he never made the premiere. I don't think he was ever in USC, was he? I
No,
don't remember
well,
what.
UFC wouldn't hire him.
Yeah, because of that, because he had lived for 20 something years as a man, which meant he was way bigger than these women he was fighting.
For a backdrop, for those that aren't familiar with the Fallon Fox saga, it's a male to female transition, and she, sorry, don't get us banned, Sam.
I don't care.
He, she, they, as Peterson did in his video over and over again. He, she, they. He, she, they. Again, transitioned to female and started competing in female mixed martial arts and combat sports. And the common outcome was not only a win, but a fractured cheekbone or a crushed orbital or something along those lines.
These are very, very hard bones and very dangerous to break, because you can, I mean, you're talking about your face here. You're talking about the bones around your eyes. You can mess something up.
Well, and anytime something fractures in your skull, you have the chance that something points inward, and you don't want something to point inward where your brain is. If anybody didn't know, you can survive a collapsed lung from a broken rib, but having not permanent effects from something stabbing your brain is.
Yeah, Tony Romo played a full quarter with a punctured rib. It's fine.
It still hurts like hell, by the way.
But that is a specific anecdotal example of people who are being sacrificed in the name of this movement. These were women whose lives were literally put in danger. But if you look at the suicide, if you can find the suicide rates, all of these people are having their lives put in danger to push the message. Now, we were digging around because we wanted to find numbers ourselves rather than just repeating numbers I've heard elsewhere. And that turned out to be a giant pain in the butt. Because people don't seem to want to talk about suicide rates. We say we have a mental health crisis, and we should talk about mental health here in the US and in the West and the world in general. And yet it's really hard to find numbers. It's easy to find platitudes, but when I was sitting here digging around, even knowing exactly what I wanted, I couldn't find the numbers. It took a while.
I made it to where you can share, right?
Yep. So this is one I found, and again, this is just a mental health. It's not a profession. Well, I won't say it's not professional. It might be run by psychiatrists. I don't know, but it's not an academic site. This is just a layperson site to break down numbers. And they actually include here in their bullet points, the trans numbers. Okay. But 41% of trans adults attempt suicide. But what they don't include is, and this matters, is that pre or post-op. Is that with or without affirmation? Because that matters, because that's what that is what the hysteria and the agenda around the trans movement is all about, is you're literally going to kill people if you don't affirm them. Are we? So Jordan Peterson was banned for what he said about Elliot Page, because that's dangerous. Is it? Or is what the doctors and people around Elliot Page doing, is that's what is dangerous?
Well, let me put a disclaimer on, at least for myself. Elliot Page can do whatever the hell she wants with her own body.
Hmm.
To me, it's no different than any other plastic surgery. It's probably a little more dangerous in some ways than most. But at the same time, look at the crazy transformations just with plastic surgery that some people have had that end up being horrendous, but they're still pushing and pushing and pushing and doing it more and more and more. It's body dysphoria. These are all forms of body dysphoria.
And that was a point I made when I was arguing with people about this in the early days of the trans lunacy, is that, hold on a second, I can't criticize these people. I can't criticize who are having elective plastic surgeries to do this, but we all criticize not just the people, but the doctors who, I remember one a while back of, I want to look like Angelina Jolie. And she went in for a dozen plastic surgeries so she could look like Angelina Jolie. And she looked like some creepy computer generated version of Angelina Jolie. It was gross. It was gross and creepy. And everybody said, ew, gross and creepy. But over here on the woke side, it's no, that's brave and beautiful. That is not beautiful. And it might be brave. We can argue about that, but it ain't beautiful and it ain't healthy. And by the numbers, and this is what we were digging for, by the numbers, it's not healthy. Okay.
This is
Thank you.
this
I
is
needed to see that.
Yeah. People have been doing crazy things to their bodies for whatever reason.
Yeah.
For as long as doctors have been willing to do it. So what he does with his body, they does with their body, is not my business. It's the fact that I'm forced to celebrate it. That's the other thing. I don't give a what they do.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also not proud of you.
But in this specific example, though, Jordan Peterson is an academic and a clinical psychologist or psychiatrist. He is well within his right, but also his area of expertise to, and as I understand it, I think what Twitter said is the specific reason he was banned was because he cited the doctors, that the doctors who were doing this were in the wrong. And coming from a professional,
I thought the latest was they didn't give him a specific. He was speculating.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't remember who I was listening to him when he was talking about this, but that may have been then his speculation. But he
well, no, let me take it a different direction, because this is where it goes wrong again. The disclaimer was she could do what they could do whatever they want with their body. But it's the fact that because of the way they is doing it in a public light and in a way that says this could help people, in essence, they is giving medical advice based on their own personal lived experience. Medical advice that may destroy or may help someone's life. And you were bringing up the numbers to say, well, it's probably the former, not the latter.
And that is, so you've got, I've heard this repeated, and I was trying to find a source for it, that 41% that website showed, that's pre or post, that the suicide rate doesn't seem to improve with all this affirmation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we sourced, we went to Deborah So's work, and a lot of people are sourcing a 2011 Swedish study, and it showed a 20-fold increase in death by suicide by transgender individuals post-op, but that wasn't compared to not post-op.
Mm-hmm.
That was just compared to the standard cohort, i.e. everybody else that randomly was assigned from the population. So it's still cloudy what the final analysis is.
But now that study that you had found that somebody was citing incorrectly, and Deborah So mentioned in her book, that does show pretty definitively that the rate compared to the normal population is catastrophically higher.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's get in our wheelhouse here. Fitness profession. Body dysmorphia is what we're talking about. Now, it's specifically in this one, muscle dysmorphia, because once you start lifting, you're never big enough, right? And we've got you can see all of the sources here. We've got a very clear line to suicide rate amongst people with body dysmorphia to begin with. It's not a new phenomenon. And the fact that there's a cause attached to it is the only thing clouding the water. And giving a bodybuilder more steroids and more HGH to get even bigger does not improve outcomes. Neither does helping that person that wants to be the lizard have more lizard qualities help with outcomes. So we know this from every other thing that involves body dysphoria. And to say it would be different in this population because it involves gender, the accusation's on the other side, and the accusation needs to provide the proof. Because
I just thought of another example. Is it's like giving someone who has bulimia, it's like prescribing them Ipecac. Would that be ethical? Hell, would that be legal? That's what we're talking about here. Is you have people who are bulimic, and you're prescribing them Ipecac to make it easier for them to throw up what they eat.
Here's where it gets, again, politics ruins everything, because gender is a political issue. I use the word body dysphoria, body dysmorphia, but that's a mental illness, mental disorder. And the transgender community is trying to normalize things. It's not an illness or a disorder. It is the normal way of life for people. They just happen to be born this way. Well, people are born schizophrenic too. And people are born, with psychopathy. People are born with Asperger's. It doesn't mean we treat them like everybody else should be like them. We treat them like, we have compassion for this thing you have. Now let's help you fit into society.
I do want to, this took 2 seconds to find because it's not as nuclear as
that's why I went to bodybuilding, because I was like, we got a perfect example that's not going to be hidden in clouds.
Well, and it ties in, because what you're talking about, the body dysmorphia of bodybuilders, they're pumping HGH and testosterone and other things into their body. And MD Anderson, hormones can affect your weight, your body temperature, and even your mood. They can also have an impact on your cancer risk. I mean, it's kind of, everybody knows this now, or at least they think they do. You can find details from experts. Here's one from the National Cancer Institute about estrogen specifically. Estrogen, a group of female sex hormones, are known human carcinogens. What is it that male to female trans take lots of? And I think that was the point. One of the points that Jordan was making is, how is this ethical for a doctor to do? This isn't balancing a hormone. This isn't correcting a chemical imbalance. This is taking a chemical and throwing it over into the danger zone. And it's not only can you not criticize it, you are required to affirm and celebrate it. That's lunacy, and that is what I meant by the sacrifices being made. This is Fallon Fox is the anecdotal specific example, and here are the statistical examples of, even if you don't fall into that 41% are going to commit suicide, you're probably going to end up in an early cancerous grave.
Let me kind of close this out by, from a scientific standpoint, we've tried to bring up statistics, but we found they were really hard to find.
Mm-hmm.
And there are reasons behind it, because we're going to have to look at retrospective cohorts. We're going to have to do prospective cohorts. We're going to have to do a lot of things. And basically, a lot of them would violate the Nuremberg protocols, because remember, we brought up my research, just drawing a little bit of blood took a lot of approvals, right? So now think of what kind of experiments you would have to run to see what the actual numbers are on this. You would have to submit so many children, enough to be significantly statistically significant, through a gender affirming protocol where they transition early, and you would have to deny some of those, and you can't blind this. You may be able to blind the hormone blockers, but you wouldn't be able to blind the actual surgical interventions. But still, and even the hormone blockers would be hard, because a girl's going to notice when she starts growing boobs, and a guy's going to notice when he starts getting pubic hair or whatever else, a jawline or any of those things. So you can kind of blind it, but not really. But you would have to have two arms of a group, one where you denied them the service they requested, one where you gave them the service they requested, and then follow that group. And it would have to be a large enough number of people for it to be significant. And we wouldn't even know the answer for 20 years, 20, 30, 40 years. The Swedish study, I think, was over 30 years. And that was a prospective cohort. So it's nothing that could be answered now. We won't know the answer, and we would have to basically risk a lot of people in the process to get it done. There's no way this would be an ethical experiment. So we have to kind of go with what we know and look at the populations we have now. And at best, it's even. And at worst, we're actually doing extra harm. There is no side that you can look at that says there's actually benefit to this, because it's not clear enough. And you're doing too many crazy things to try to push this.
So my final thought on this, I just had this thought because you'd mentioned something, and I thought, well, surely this isn't nuclear, and I can actually find this number. And yeah, took 2 seconds. The first link I found is this is on PubMed. It was published in 2010 in the Journal of Psychopharmacology. Suicide and schizophrenia, a systematic review of rates and risk factors. And just from the introduction, people with schizophrenia are known to die much earlier than expected. Up to 40% of this excess premature mortality can be attributed to suicide. So
and surprisingly enough, for people that aren't familiar with schizophrenia, is that's in their moments of reality. When they're off in their own world, they're not socially fine, but they're actually more mentally stable when it comes to actually harming themselves. It's when they have a moment of clarity where they just like, holy crap, this sucks.
So as I've been ranting about, we're supposed to be able to talk about mental illness, and we have a mental health crisis. Okay, well, here you have schizophrenia, one of the most severe mental illnesses there is, and up to 40% of premature excess deaths of schizophrenics is suicide. And so we need to have a serious conversation about this. Oh, but this other thing over here that's got a similar suicide rate, no, that's brave and beautiful. This is utter nonsense, and it is harming people.
think that's a good place to stop so we don't get banned. But no, it was an important point that needed to be brought up. And again, I think the direction of it is more divisive than what they want inclusive. And personally, this is the cynical part of me. When the more I studied activism, the more I realized so much of this is just done on purpose to piss people off. Because when you piss people off, you get a reaction. And it's all about the reaction. It's not about what actually is, because the reaction proves your point in their eyes, I should say.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
And in the public square, it does kind of do it, because it makes someone look bad, you know.
Yeah. Compare and contrast. Go dig into this, people, and study and make yourself mentally healthier. Martin Luther King Jr. had a very specific method for how they were going to protest. And I'm brain farting on what he called it, but there was a statement of principles of nonviolence that he demanded you sign. And it was more than just your signature. It was an oath to God that you would not break these, because no matter what, we cannot let the news cameras catch us doing even a fraction of what they're going to do to us, because it will ruin what we're trying to do here, which is shock white America that doesn't know and doesn't care about what's going on here.
Let me cross streams with your statement there. His movement was about the reaction as well. But the more right you are, the more just you are, the less extreme you have to get to get the reaction you need. And all he did was had people show up in suits, basically.
Yeah.
And the fact that showing up in a suit got a negative reaction, that was a testament to how wrong we were at the time. And these things where people have to do these elaborate games to get a reaction out of people, especially in the media market, that's a testament to how off base they actually are.
And now compare and contrast. This is why it matters that people found footage of the founder of BLM Inc. bragging that she and her cohorts that were helping her were trained Marxists, her own words. Go find some of Lenin's statements about what they were trying to do and how they brought about the October Revolution when they were a small minority of the country. And it was exactly that. It is, we're going to provoke a reaction, and then we can act in the chaos.
Not only that, is we don't have, this is Lenin as well. I'm going to obviously we're paraphrasing everything he says because it was in Russian, but we don't have the guns. So we're going to win the ballot box. When we've won the ballot box, we will have the guns, and then we will use the guns. And that's a pretty good summary of his statements.
All right. Well, where do we go from here?
Let's talk gay parents, since we talked transgender. So, and it's semi-connected because you brought up Peterson, and I came across an interview of him with Dave Rubin, which both of them are relatively conservative in their viewpoints, but it was specifically about a certain topic. It wasn't it is a political topic, but it wasn't like a political talk, because from we brought it up in a previous episode because I was mad at the reaction, and this is actually tied to the reaction that I was mad about. I was mad at the reaction to Dave and his husband Dave putting up the ultrasounds of the children that they're going to have with surrogate parents. So they're going to basically have two kids about the same time with surrogate mothers. So they each have a child of their own that they're raising together. And the main reaction that pissed me off was, there's two reactions. First, there was the right reaction, which was, oh, this is against God's work or whatever, and all of these things. Gay parents are the end of humanity and all of this. But that's not what I want to speak to today, because that's your side to bitch about. I'm going to bitch about the people on my side. The feminist reaction, and I'm talking the radical feminist reaction, was you're using women's wombs, you're rent a womb, all of this. And this was part of the conversation because he brought up the negative feedback they got. But I want to say, where's my body, my choice? Because if it's your choice to terminate a pregnancy, why is it not the choice of a mother to have a pregnancy, no matter what the reason? She wasn't forced to carry this baby. You know, these people choose to be surrogate mothers. And I wanted to just throw the general concept out there, and then I'm going to give a nice little biological wrap up to it. But that's my thing. Where's my body, my choice?
Well, that's not where my brain went. My brain went so my first thought was, that's like criticizing someone who donates a kidney. Seriously, okay.
That, yeah.
Here is somebody. Forget the specific situation. Someone wants to have a child, cannot for whatever reason, and whether it's for financial reasons or pure altruism, a woman volunteers her body to help this person achieve this biological end. How is that any different than someone saying, I've got 2 kidneys, you can have one of mine? And you're criticizing that? You're criticizing that altruistic move to help another human being? Screw you.
I just thought it was a contradictory thing, because a lot of people have been bringing up the, well, where was my body, my choice when we were talking about vaccine mandates? And there's a simple, I think wrong, but a simple rebuttal to that, which is the danger to other people.
There's a theoretical
blah, 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 blah.
rebuttal.
Yeah, a theoretical rebuttal. But I saw the reaction there, and I'm like, this is actually a direct correlate. Where is this slogan when it comes to surrogate parents? This isn't rent a body. There is a monetary involvement, usually, but that makes actually perfect sense.
Well, because there's a lot of monetary costs that goes along with carrying a child.
Well, not only that, it makes perfect sense from other perspectives as well. But okay, so there's a certain percentage of men, and it's actually higher than we would like, that like to spread their seed and don't care about the kids. They just do it. And we have this natural drive to spread our genes, right? Well, women have that too. And most of them want to actually be the parent of that child and to take care of that child. But what if you have no desire to have a family, but yet you still feel the drive to reproduce,
to carry a child, to birth a child,
to spread your genes? Because remember, as a surrogate mom, you are 50% of the genetic component of that child, with a gay couple, at least in this situation we're talking about. So why deny someone who made the decision, I don't want to have a traditional family, I don't want to have a picket fence and 2.5 kids and a dog, but yet I feel this urge to reproduce? You know what? There's this whole group of people that want to have those things I don't want, but they can't do this thing I can do. We do that all the time with everything. I have this skill, or I have this ability, I have this innate part of me that I can use to benefit society and other people. Let me make some money off of it.
Hell, why do we have lots of commercials from the American Red Cross for donating blood?
I've got extra, here you go.
I got extra, here you go.
Yeah. And so, oh yeah, she's going to carry this child for a little north of 9 months, right? So that's where I think the monetary investment, it actually makes sense too, because not only the costs you were talking about, but also the fact that women have a higher reproductive investment. If you want to be a sperm donor, it takes about 10 minutes and a naughty magazine, and you can get something into a cup. But if you're the female, you have that long gestation period and a little bit of time after, if you're going to talk about breastfeeding, although he said they actually have a freezer full of breast milk, so I don't know how to, I guess people sell their breast milk as well, but
Yeah, but I thought there were specific connections to the mother and child for your
no,
mother's breast milk.
the act of doing it is the connection.
Mm.
Now you do get the immune benefits relative to whatever your mother's exposed to, but that can be environmental. So if you're
Mm.
out of your mother's environment, then I mean, you're not getting that specifically from whatever they bought either, but it's still better than.
Well, getting back to the specific example of, but this is where Peterson comes in, and I didn't watch this one yet, but I have heard him talk about this years ago, and he simply said, and people got all irate about it, and he simply said, look, there are differences, and I'm not saying, you know, two men or two women can't raise a child together or shouldn't raise a child together. I'm just saying there are differences, and we don't have the data yet to show what that means. So you need to understand that we do have the data, that it's very stark and very clear for a single parent versus a two-parent household. So we know how potentially bad that can be. So you need to be aware of it. You need to be aware that you don't have the masculine and feminine dynamic, or you don't have the male and female dynamic. And I remember him in one time when someone asked him this, that he mentioned this specific. Now we don't know, because this is so new. Is it enough to have a masculine and a feminine dynamic, or do you need the male and female? Do you need the man and woman? We don't know, but you need to be aware of that, in the same way that, you know, he's mentioned before his daughter as an example when he's talking about personality trait differences between men and women. Okay, men succeed more easily in the workplace because they have these personality traits that lend themselves to that. So my daughter wants to be able to have a successful corporate career. Okay, well, here are your personality traits. Here's your psychology. So this is what you need to know. This is how you need to plan and what you need to do to achieve that, because you're going to have to overcome different obstacles. Same freaking thing with non-traditional parenting.
Yeah, the reason I wanted to bring this up was we talk so much about the women's rights to terminate, but we never talk about the other side of that. And it's almost as important, especially since things like gay marriage exist now, because it is an avenue for a child to have a loving family, and these other people that have no desire to have a family to still contribute of their own free will. And then they did go into a lot of these are the things children need, and it was a pretty intense conversation in that part, because cognition goes into it. The fact that Dave is aware that this is something that could be lacking is already step one to making it not a lack, right? So what female characters do we have in this person's life? And Peterson went into the fact that it needs to be consistent. It can't be female swapping, it can't be. So if it's multiple, they have to all be there from the beginning, and all of these different things. So we got very technical on that realm. But as far as the reaction, that was my point here.
Yeah, this ties into the trans discussion we were just having, because this is the disconnect, and this is where the woke crowd is harming people to push its agenda. This is where they're breaking lots of eggs to make their omelet. Is you can't even talk about differences. You can't talk about statistics. You can't talk about potential pitfalls, or you are suddenly denigrating and discriminating against a group. No, I'm not. I'm just telling you, look, here are the numbers, and the numbers and the data and everything we know about childhood development says this. Okay. Now, then here's an example I use often. There's a difference between saying the rate of violent criminal behavior among young black men is astronomically higher than any other demographic. And then taking that and making the leap that because black men are inherently bad for XYZ. Okay, that's over there. Yep, that's over there. That's where you've taken that leap into bigotry. Simply citing the numbers is simply citing the numbers. And then because you have to have that baseline of fact to have any discussion.
Mm-hmm.
But in these instances, you have to have that baseline of fact to help people. Peterson is trying to help people, Rubin specifically, but then of course he has an audience. So anyone in a similar situation listening to him is these are the potential pitfalls. So you need to be aware of them.
Well, even as a heterosexual couple, if you were listening to that interview and you have a child or you're looking to have a child, you can still get benefit from, oh, this is what children need at certain periods of their lives. So well, maybe guess what? Maybe I'm a feminine male and I have a masculine wife. We're both heterosexual, but on the gender spectrum, I'm feminine and she's masculine. Well, maybe we know we both have to supply that other thing. Or maybe I'm a masculine dude and gym bro, and I'm attracted to masculine gym bro women. Well, you know what? We probably need to find a way to get some nurturing mentality in that child's life. So it's beneficial just to know the ins and outs of that. You don't have to know everything about it, just to know the general concepts lets you know where, oh, we need to evaluate where we're lacking here. Even still, maybe we need to get a little help. I had to learn how to be a good father because I didn't have a good father figure. But I was aware of the fact that, you know what, I didn't have a good example. Maybe I need to do a little bit of studying up on stuff. And it's still difficult because I come across something new because he's still developing it's like, I know what made me tough, but that's not exactly what you do to a kid. So how do I make him tough in a way that's proper, that's going to help him develop in other ways well. So it's the fact that people just, it's like the saying we've brought up before. A man is 40,000% less effective in a fight than he thinks he is. We all think we're perfect parents coming out of the womb, right? But knowing your deficiencies is the most beneficial thing you can do for your kid. And this is an extreme example of that, but at the same time, that extreme examples help us learn too.
Knowing your deficiencies is the most beneficial thing you can do for any individual under any circumstances. And that scales. It's also for any community, for any culture, for any nation. You have to know your deficiencies. And for all the talk of mental health and for all the talk of, helping marginalized people, we're not actually allowed to frankly discuss our deficiencies.
No, because that's shaming.
Mm-hmm.
You put your label, add shaming to the end of it. Whether that's your inability to control your food intake or to be disciplined enough to get a little exercise or to get up out of bed and go to work. It goes across all of those things, but you can't say anything about it because they have this disorder and you're shaming.
Yeah, my hips hurt and my neck pain has flared up, so I'm just gonna not bother with the gym anymore. And when we're done recording, I'm gonna sit here and play video games and eat Doritos. Don't shame me.
Doritos.
Don't shame me. I got a box of double stuffed Oreos somewhere too.
You know what? I got over my craving for Oreos. You know how I used to eat them all the time? And that's when I was a fat monkey. But then even when I got fit again, I still made time for them. Somewhere along the line, I just stopped craving Oreos. And I wish I had the magic bullet that did it or what.
Well, I would assume it would have been sometime after you started intermittent fasting, because that's what did it for me for a lot of junk food in general. I can't stand fast food anymore because it is so unsatisfying now, because I went without for so long that it just, I broke that psychological craving. And then once you've broken that psychological craving, then the physical satisfaction just isn't there.
You know, you might be right, because I just really don't have a lot of craving for sweets in general. Like, there was a donut shop right by my gym, and I never craved a donut the whole time I was there. But still, savory, salty foods, I crave all the time. So you put a bag of chips in the house and it's gone.
Oh, you sweat a lot.
Well, but it's still, those are the things that would make sense in a fasted state, because you do lose salt. You do lose the fat that's in the chips. It's probably not even the potato in the chip. It's probably the fat it's fried in that I'm craving.
This is an interesting place to end up for the for closing out our little political philosophical discussion here, because there's an analogy there between intermittent fasting and get the hell off of social media and stay away from the news unless it's, you know, actual news and not the outrage porn that the news is now. That you stay away from that stuff long enough, and then you can more easily control your emotional reaction to things. That I don't get nearly as irate, and unless it's about certain things. The things like the Uvalde shooting, still, even if I'm looking at it from a source that isn't engaged in trying to stoke outrage for clicks, I still get very emotional, because that's the kind of thing that makes me emotional. But all this other nonsense, I mostly just roll my eyes at it, because I've stayed away from it so long. I've kind of retrained my brain.
Yeah, there's also the other part of it, is purposefully stressing yourself actually is beneficial. That's how exercise works. You know, that's how cold therapy works. That's how all of these other things work. So but yeah, if you have something that's habitual response, probably your advice is the best.
Well, and that is where you break that psychological deficiency. We're talking about deficiencies, and you need to, you know, be able to recognize those and think about those. Break that psychological deficiency, and then you can more productively stress yourself. You can more productively, okay, let me go find, instead of this clickbait nonsense, which is what social media is. It's, here's the headline, get outraged, and then keep scrolling. No, break yourself of that, and then you can delve into more long form, you know, podcasts and discussions. The kind of things we tend towards more is, I'm not going to scroll through and get outraged at a bunch of headlines about COVID. I'm going to sit and I'm going to listen to, or while I'm working in the garden or whatever, Dr. Malone talk for 3 hours. Okay. One is much more intellectually productive and sparks good growth. Perpetual psychological outrage is not productive growth.
Well, and just like we talked about with reading, you can find we talked about the balance between fiction and nonfiction. You can find the things that you just talked about, Malone, but then I like to listen to something like Dr. Peter Attia, who is who does a lot of fitness and diet and nutrition stuff. So I don't have to get any politics for about 3 hours. And, you know, something I need for my profession anyways, and I learn a few things here and there. It reinforces things I already knew. It challenges me to look at some of my preconceived ideals. Doesn't mean I was wrong. It just means, well, he said something different than what I thought. Maybe I need to go into that a little bit more. So have something like that too in your hip pocket. Now, if you do that more often, then maybe you want to venture into the social political for a little bit and listen to long form on that. So it just depends on where you're at. But if you're struggling with something nutrition wise or whatever, find somebody like that will give you a little background information. I gave you a name right there. Dr. Peter Otia is really great. But they're all over the place. Just look at the packaging. The more flashy and flary they are, they're probably not the ones you want to look at. The one, what is the guy that comes across the YouTube advertisements all the time that is like, stop doing this, don't do that, don't do that if you really want to lose weight, and then I hit skip. That guy probably not so much. But we've named a lot of them when it comes to fitness. But let's go ahead and end the social political. We didn't give any medical advice. We didn't give any training advice, really. We didn't give any election fortification advice. So I think don't ban us, please, just because we mentioned a certain he, she, him, her, they, zer.
All right. Well, let me go refill my coffee and then let's talk some what.
All right.